to my channel where we question everything. Today's topic is military affairs and basically a summary on what is happening on the Ukraine-Russian front. And basically we're going to discuss a short video about what's happening. Well, to be honest, there's very little actually happening. The front lines are fairly stable. Let's talk about the northern front in Kharkiv region. The Ukrainians are still advancing bit by bit, very slowly, very little. They do occupy or conquer or some small towns, but nothing is really being achieved, majorly achieved. The huge gains that the Ukrainian army has made in the last couple of weeks has basically now grounded to a halt. There are still some skirmishes, and again, according to the Ministry of Defense, the Russian one, daily reports the Ukrainians are suffering heavy losses. But I've explained many times that is a debatable point, and one has to basically clarify what do you mean by considerable losses. So the northern front, nothing is much happening. Then we have the more middle section, like the Bakhmut area, or no, a little bit higher, the Liman area. Nothing is happening there either. It's local skirmishes. Unfortunately, people always die in these skirmishes, and that is unfortunate. Then we go down to Bakhmut. Yes, I know, always people talk about the Wagner Group. The Wagner Group has entered Bakhmut, or at least some sections. But I don't understand fully why the people are always talking about the Wagner Group. They are contract mercenaries, but they are not thousands and thousands of troops. As far like there are conflicting numbers. The members might be anything between 5,000 and 9,000 members. I don't know which one I should believe, but they are also active all around the world. Also in Africa and other countries. So how many of the members take part in the Russian special military operation, I'm not totally sure. But I don't think that there are like thousands of them. They have to be supported by the Donbas militia, which is now the Russian army. So let's forget about the militias. Let's always talk about the Russian army now. And as far as I know is that the Russian troops are moving from the south to Bakhmut. They are conquering some smaller cities or towns in between. And they are progressing in the, as one guy would say, clean-up ops in Bakhmut. And anyway, I believe that's the only offensive that really goes on, and where the Russians are advancing, but very, 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 very slow. But the outcome is again a foregone conclusion. The Russians will take Bakhmut, and then they will proceed and liberate other parts of the Donetsk Oblast, or it's now, I don't know how to call it anymore, because it's now part of Russia territory. And then we look at Zaporizhzhia area. There was supposed to be a big offense and so on. Nothing happened. And then we come to the main battleground, and that is the Kherson area. If you haven't noticed or been informed, the Russians are evacuating Kherson city itself. It is not a retreat, or at least I don't believe it's a retreat. It is in order to protect the civilians, because the Ukrainians are shelling Kherson city with HIMARSs and other long-distance missiles. So there is a danger of civilians being killed. Same what happened in the northern front, where motor queues, no, where people tried to flee the Ukrainian area to the Russian side, and then they were bombed by the Ukrainian forces. and then a lot of people actually died. I think more than 30 in two separate incidents. So let's call it 60 minimum. The question is basically, what will the Russians do? Now, currently, in my opinion, the Russians are digging in. Even the Ukrainian commanders are confirming that. The Russians, counter to what the narrative is, might retreat. I don't think so. As I stated previously, the special military operation has now become a proper conflict between two nations. It hasn't been declared a war because declaring a war has certain legal implications. And that's, I believe, Putin didn't want. But there is a call-up of a lot of 300,000 reserves. At one stage, 220 were already called up, and then there were about 70,000 volunteers. Now, I'm not totally sure if those 70,000 volunteers are going to be added to the 300,000, or they will just make up the number of the final total of 300,000 reservists. I would believe it will be actually 370,000, because a call-up is a call-up. And the legal framework has been given for 300,000 reservists, Russian reservists, to be called up. And therefore, they will fulfill that target, whether the people will be called up like it or not. But so in total, I think at the end of the day, it will be about 370,000. But that's my opinion, just going basically on what was stated. So it's basically now a waiting game. Now, many times in different videos, especially crosstalk and so on, they always say that time is on the Russian side. For the near future, it's not on the Russian side. There are limited troops of Russians on the Kherson front, and there are major troop concentration of the Ukrainians forces on the other side. And they do attack on a daily basis. It is small, highly mobile groups, and they try to penetrate the Russian defenses, probing where are the weak spots. And while there is talk of a major offense, but it's talk, doesn't mean there is going to be. But if the Ukrainians want to do an offense against Kherson, then they have to do it very soon, before the bulk of those 300,000 reservists reach the front. But in the meantime, the Russians have to dig in, and while they are digging in, they have to protect against any attacks from the Ukrainians. And they are basically now still understaffed, and they are waiting for some of the reservists to come in. Yes, some have already arrived. There's a huge military buildup of armament on its way, while it's in Crimea and on its way, and various other sections of the new territories. Hey, that's a better name. Let's call it the new territories. And so the weapons are coming, the personnel, the reservoirs are coming. So each day, the Kherson Russian front is being strengthened. And, well, until it has been reached to a proper strength, that is the time frame that the Russians are vulnerable. So what I want us to wait and see what will happen. I don't want to make any guesses because nobody really knows when is what going to happen. And will the Russians retreat? No ways. This is now the battle where they will stand and make their fight. And with enough equipment and enough personnel, they will repel the Ukrainian forces' attacks, and they will have no need to retreat. And they will also not suffer that many losses because they have the manpower and the equipment then in place. So if they retreat currently, then it would be like very small areas or very short distances of retreat, and to get into a better position. So let's hope that they can withstand the probing attacks from the Ukrainians until the bulk of the reservists and armament has reached that front. Again, Kherson was evacuated for precautional purposes, not because they're going to basically retreat beyond Kherson. From a military standpoint of view, it doesn't make sense. What I don't understand, just for intersect, is that they call it the Russians are on the west, on the right side of the Dnieper River. I don't know how you see it unless you stand on the North Pole and then you look downwards to the South Pole, then the Russians are on the right-hand side. But if you look at the normal map of Earth, then usually south is at the bottom, north at the top. So the Russians are actually on the left side of the Dnieper River. So it's a little bit confusing, the narrative on how we pronounce. So it would rather be better to say the Russians are on the western side of the Dnieper River. And that is a military strategic point. There is some talk that the Ukrainians would like to, while they are busy bombing the hydroelectric plant at Kakhovka, I think I pronounced it right, Kakhovka, and the dam, or the lake, and it's a huge lake, and if they break the dam, then the water will rise and will flood a lot of towns, and civilians will die, and that would be like a terrorist act. Well, that's what the Russians say, and it will be irresponsible. Well, I can agree with it would be irresponsible, but it won't be a terrorist attack. Firstly, the Russians in Izium, I think it was Izium, they did blow up a dam wall in order to flood the river, in order to delay the attack from the Ukrainian army. So they did use dam and water to raise the levels of the river. So if they did it, then the Ukrainians might as well do it themselves. So that's one of the reasons why I argue like that. And the second reason is that there are a number of bridges connecting the west side with the east side of the river, and the Russians are using pontoons to cross and resupply their troops on the western side of the Dnieper River. But they are also using the Kakhovka Dam as an access route where they transport some of their supplies and equipment. Now, if you transport it over the dam wall, then that dam wall becomes a military target. So again, pro-Russian people punters are misrepresenting the facts on the ground. So the Russians, according to my information, they do use the access that the dam wall provides in order to resupply their own troops on the western side of the Dnieper, together with certain pontoons and bridges that they did set up. And again, just for intersects, when the Russians went to UN Security Council complaining about the dirty bomb, they also said that the Russians were providing supplies and so on via these pontoon bridges to the civilian population, and therefore it will also be an act of terrorism because the Ukrainians are bombing the pontoons in order to destroy it, so they destroying the supply lines to the civilian population on the western side, which is untrue. Yes, they do supply it for the civilians, but they also use those pontoons and access bridges for resupplying their soldiers. So I just want to point out, you see the fine narrative that both parties are using in order to confuse the real purpose and playing the blame game. So we're all now waiting until the reserve are pitched up, until the Russian troop concentrations have been allocated, that the whole front is stabilized. And then the winter will be here, and then, well, according to some pundits, which I totally agree with, the winter offensive will begin. And it will probably then move to Nikolaev, and then finally Odessa, then Transnistria. and then we will see what will happen then. Unless there's negotiations, which I have mentioned previously. But then nobody really knows. So nobody is desperate enough yet to seek an end to the conflict. There's some talk and there's some talk, but unfortunately these things take time, and time doesn't stand still, and the Russians have to act. So the longer they take, the longer they wait, the more painful it will become, and the more territory Ukraine will lose. So basically at this stage we are in a waiting game, maybe for another couple of weeks, unless the Ukrainians start the offensive. And then, well, you have to give the credit to Ukrainians. They do make progress. It's not that they just stood still. So let's see what's happening. Please subscribe to the channel. I would like to get the numbers up so that we can have more features. Spread the word, share the links to these videos to your friends, and hopefully we can improve the channel. Until next time, cheers.